He walked into the wrong office on a Tuesday morning. No appointment, no suit, no idea that the woman behind the glass wall would stop the entire board meeting just to look at him. What happened next wasn't luck. It was something far more powerful and far more unexpected. Before we begin, if you enjoy heartfelt stories that restore your faith in kindness, second chances, and the quiet magic of everyday people, you're in the right place. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you never miss a story that might just change the way you see the world. Now, let's begin. Single dad walked into the wrong office. The billionaire CEO who avoided love for 12 years froze. The boardroom at Whitmore Global felt colder than usual that Thursday morning, not because of the temperature, but because of the tension that clung to the air like frost on glass. 12 high-level executives sat rigid around the gleaming oak table, their eyes flicking between the quarterly losses projected on the screen and the woman at the head of the table. Ava Whitmore, 35. CEO and heir to the Whitmore legacy, sat upright with her arms crossed. Her posture was immaculate. Her expression was unreadable. No one dared interrupt her silence. 300, she finally said, her voice sharp and even. We cut 300 positions by the end of Q1. No exceptions. A muffled cough came from the CFO's side. A junior VP tried to raise his voice with a "but Ava" and quickly backed down under her glare. Outside, New York's winter pressed against the floor-to-ceiling windows, snow drifting down like ash. Inside, the only warmth came from the muted whir of the espresso machine behind the glass doors of the executive lounge. And then the door opened. Not the quiet, deliberate creak of someone with clearance. Not the knock of an assistant. This was a confused, hesitant push followed by the appearance of a man no one had seen before. He stood in the doorway in a worn navy jacket, jeans faded at the knees and boots dusted with salt from the sidewalk. His short brown hair was slightly tousled and a small scar just above his right eyebrow gave him a rugged, weathered look. Sorry," he said, looking around the table of suits. "I think I've got the wrong room." The silence snapped taut. The security officer, already rising from his seat near the back, stepped forward. "Sir, this is a restricted meeting." "Wait," Ava said. It was a single word, but it dropped like a stone in water. The man, Jack Carter, froze, startled by her voice. Ava didn't know why she'd said it. Her board looked at her baffled. Even Melissa, her longtime assistant, who rarely showed surprise, blinked. But Ava couldn't look away. She'd heard that voice before, somewhere beyond the walls of polished marble and corporate rank, somewhere far more chaotic. She studied him, his stance, his worn boots, the way his hand hovered near the door like he wasn't sure if he should retreat or explain. "Who are you here to see?" she asked evenly. Jack cleared his throat. "I had a 10:30 interview for a maintenance position. The security guard told me 12th floor, left hallway. Guess I turned the wrong way." The room stayed silent. Jack stepped back toward the door. "Stay," Ava said again. Even she was startled by how firmly it came out. Jack hesitated. "I really didn't mean to interrupt. I said stay." Ava stood. The board members exchanged glances. A few opened their mouths to protest, but one glance from Ava shut them down. "Melissa," she said without turning her gaze away from the man, reschedule the next 2 meetings. "Tell HR I'll personally handle the 10:30 interview." Melissa hesitated. "Yes, ma'am." Jack looked uncomfortable as though he were part of a joke he didn't understand. "Ma'am, I don't want to cause trouble." "You didn't," she said, "but you're here now, and that's rare." A pause. Then she added, almost to herself, "I don't believe in coincidences." "Mr. Carter?" he said. "Jack Carter." Ava's fingers curled at her side. That name, not just the voice. The name stirred something buried under 12 years of ice. She didn't flinch, didn't blink, but she felt it like a door creaking open somewhere deep in memory. 12 years ago. Rain, screaming metal. Her body pinned inside a burning car. and a man's arms lifting her out, rough hands, the smell of smoke and iron, and a calm, steady voice that whispered, "You're okay now. I've got you." She'd never seen his face, only heard his voice. She hadn't heard it again until now. "Mr. Carter." She said, her tone softening just a touch. "Wait for me in the lounge across the hall. I'll be there in 10 minutes. Jack nodded slowly, still puzzled. "Sure." Thanks." He stepped out. The door clicked behind him. The room remained silent until the CFO broke the spell. "Was that normal?" Ava turned back to her chair. "We'll discuss staffing cuts later." Meeting adjourned. They filtered out quickly, some curious, some muttering. Melissa stayed behind. "That was unlike you," she said carefully. Ava didn't answer right away. She looked toward the window where the snow had thickened, covering the city like a second skin. "Pull Jack Carter's file," she said finally, "and any handwritten notes attached." "Handwritten?" Melissa echoed. There was a child's letter in the bundle. Her voice trembled just slightly. "I want to see it again." Melissa hesitated. "Of course." As the assistant stepped out, Ava sat back down, her heart thudding behind her composed exterior. Jack Carter. She whispered the name to herself like a riddle. Was it possible? Could the man who walked in by mistake be the one who once saved her life? Outside, the snow kept falling, and for the first time in 12 years, Ava Whitmore felt something shift inside her. Not fear. Not strategy, but a strange and unfamiliar flicker of something softer. Hope. The letter was folded 3 times, the paper soft and slightly creased at the corners. Ava sat alone in her private office, the noise of the city reduced to a distant hum behind double-paned glass. Outside, snow flurried past the windows like ghosts from a forgotten time. Inside, her world was quiet, but her mind was anything but. She had read the letter before. It had arrived 2 weeks ago, tucked inside a resume scrawled in ballpoint ink. Melissa had flagged it as unusual and placed it in the low-priority stack. At the time, Ava had barely skimmed it. Her days were a blur of mergers, personnel restructuring, and bleeding headlines about an industry in decline. But that night, something about the small envelope had drawn her in. Now, under the desk lamp's soft glow, she read it again. "Dear CEO, my dad is applying for a job in your big white building. I hope you are nice. He's really good at fixing things and he makes pancakes every Sunday. My mom passed away when I was 4, but my dad never misses a bedtime hug. He doesn't smile much anymore, but I think a good job would help him. Please give him a chance. He won't say anything special about himself, but he's the best person I know. Love, Ellie. Age, 9. Ava's fingers traced the last line. She swallowed hard, blinking away something hot behind her eyes. It had been a long time since anything written had touched her, longer still since she'd allowed it to. Ellie. The girl's words rang with honesty, untouched by manipulation or exaggeration. It wasn't the letter of someone trying to make her father sound perfect. It was just real. And Jack Carter, his name still echoed in Ava's mind like a bell tolling in fog. The voice, the scar, that calm way he'd spoken in the boardroom like he didn't expect anything from anyone. Just like 12 years ago. She stood and walked to the sleek file cabinet across the room. Her hand hovered above the locked drawer at the bottom, one she hadn't opened in a decade. Her mother had once called it a drawer of weakness. But Ava had locked away more than weakness in there. She'd locked away the moment her life split into 2 before the accident and after. She inserted the key. Inside, stacked beneath medical reports and sealed photographs, was the old manila envelope she hadn't dared open in years. She pulled it out with slow reverence. Inside was a clipping from a fire department memo, anonymous civilian rescue at the scene of a car accident on Route 9, no badge number, only a first name given at the ER reception desk. Jack, no last name, no follow-up, no thank you. just a life saved and a mystery left to rot in memory. Ava sank into the chair beside the cabinet, the folder on her lap. For 12 years, she had buried the image of the man who had carried her out of the burning wreck, wrapped her in his coat, and whispered, "You're going to be all right." She never saw his face clearly smoke, and blood had blurred the moment, but she had never forgotten the way he steadied her as the world collapsed. She had tried to find him, quietly. But her mother, a powerhouse in politics at the time, had silenced the press, bribed the hospital, and smothered the story before it ever reached the public. No scandals, she had said. No debt to a stranger. You got out alive. That's enough. But it wasn't. It had never been enough. Ava had walked through the next decade building an empire, earning headlines and gaining power, but inside, she'd been hollow. She didn't know what it was she had lost in that fire. Just that something had burned away and never grown back. Until today. She looked at the photo clipped to Jack Carter's resume. His face wasn't remarkable. Not classically handsome, but it was warm, steady, the kind of man who'd fix things not for recognition but because they were broken and someone had to. And now, after all these years here, he was in the wrong room, on the wrong day, with the right voice. Melissa knocked softly and entered. She paused when she saw the old envelope open but said nothing. She knew better than to interrupt Ava's silence. "I pulled his file," Melissa said gently. "There's no mention of his past as a firefighter. But I checked. Jack Carter served 10 years. Honorable discharge. Left after an injury non-combat service related. Single father. No criminal record. Clean work history. Never sued anyone. Doesn't even own a credit card." Ava closed her eyes. That sounded like the man she remembered. And the daughter, she asked, voice softer now. "Ellie, public elementary school, top of her class. Teachers say she brings extra food for kids who forget their lunch. One described her as pure sunlight in a too dark classroom." Ava smiled faintly. She didn't remember the last time a report had made her do that. "Would you like me to notify HR to fast-track him?" Melissa asked. Ava shook her head. "No, I want to handle it myself." Melissa hesitated. "Are you sure?" "Yes, Ava," said her voice firmer now. "And set a private interview with him. No cameras, no board members, just me and him." Melissa nodded and turned to leave. Ava sat still for a moment longer, holding the letter in one hand and Jack's resume in the other. She felt the cracks in her carefully constructed armor. She'd built walls to keep the world out, walls of logic, of control, of spotless suits and unreadable expressions. But this man, this wrong-door stranger with a tired smile and a daughter who wrote letters to strangers, he had found a way through. And deep inside, Ava felt something stirring that had been dormant far too long. Gratitude, wonder, and just maybe the first flicker of something she once believed she had lost forever. Trust. The hallway leading to their apartment smelled faintly of cinnamon and radiator heat, the scent of winter in a 100-year-old Brooklyn building. Jack Carter unlocked the door quietly, careful not to wake the neighbors. Ellie had fallen asleep against his arm on the train ride back. Now she stirred as he gently nudged the door open. "Hey, sleepyhead," he whispered. "We're home." Ellie blinked, then yawned and looked up at him, her brown eyes still foggy with dreams. "Did they like you?" Daddy Jack smiled as he helped her off with her coat. "I think I might have scared a whole boardroom full of people just by walking in." She giggled, rubbing her eyes. "Did they yell at you?" "Nope. Just stared at me like I was some escaped zoo animal." He winked. "Then a very fancy lady told me to wait across the hall." Ellie wrinkled her nose. Was she mean? Jack paused. The image of Ava Whitmore flickered in his mind. Her eyes cool and sharp, but not cruel. Her voice had been calm, curious, even like she was trying to remember something about him she couldn't quite place. "No," he said finally. "Not mean. Just unexpected." They stepped inside their modest apartment, the warmth hugging them like an old blanket. The furniture was second-hand but clean. the walls decorated with Ellie's drawings, paper rainbows, stars, and an entire gallery of crooked hearts labeled me, plus Daddy, yes, team. Jack hung up his coat and headed to the tiny kitchenette to heat water for tea. Ellie flopped onto the couch, pulling her knees up to her chest. "Do you think they'll call you?" she asked. Jack exhaled slowly. He didn't want to lie to her. "I'm not sure, Elle." She looked down, twirling a strand of hair around her finger. "I wrote them a letter, you know." Jack turned to her, surprised. "You did what I put it in your folder. I wrote it the night before." She gave him a sheepish smile. "I just thought maybe they should know how awesome you are." He felt something twist in his chest, equal parts pride and heartbreak. "Sweetheart, you didn't have to do that." "I wanted to." She bit her lip. "You always help everybody, Daddy, but no one helps you." Jack crouched in front of her, brushing her hair gently back. "You help me, Elle? Every day." She wrapped her arms around his neck and hugged him tight. Jack held her, his eyes closing for a moment. There were so many nights he'd gone to bed worrying about the rent, the bills, her shoes getting too small, or the sound of her cough lingering too long. But then there were moments like this, simple, quiet, pure, and he remembered why he never gave up. He was about to say so when the kettle whistled. Later, after Ellie had gone to bed, Jack sat alone on the couch with a mug of tea in his hands and the city murmuring softly through the windows. He stared out at the snow-slicked street below, headlights sweeping past like brief pulses of light. The woman in the boardroom kept creeping back into his thoughts. There was something in the way she'd looked at him. Not judgment, not confusion, recognition. But that made no sense. They couldn't have met before. He'd remember someone like her, poised, powerful, intimidating in that way people become when they've been forced to survive without softness. And yet when her eyes had locked with his, there'd been a moment, like a match striking inside a snow globe. He rubbed the scar just above his right brow, a habit when he was deep in thought. He'd gotten it years ago in a fire rescue outside Albany. No one had been seriously hurt, but the scar remained a little reminder of his former life. He rarely talked about that life anymore. Being a firefighter had meant something. It had been a purpose, a calling. But after the accident that ended his career, he'd buried the uniform and moved forward. Or tried to. His phone buzzed. He picked it up, expecting a spam text or maybe a weather alert. Instead, he saw from Melissa Tran Whitmore, Global Office of the CEO, Mr. Carter. "Ava, Whitmore requests a private meeting with you tomorrow morning at 9:00 a.m. Please check in at the main desk. She would prefer not to go through HR. Thank you." Jack stared at the message, stunned. Not HR, a private meeting. Why, he reread the message twice, then slowly put the phone down. There were moments in life he believed this deeply when the world turned just slightly on its axis. Not dramatically. Not with fireworks or applause. Just a nudge, a pivot, and suddenly you're on a different path than the one you thought you were walking. He looked toward Ellie's closed bedroom door. She had believed something good would happen. She always did. She had faith in people, in small acts of kindness, and the idea that if you stayed true and worked hard, good things would eventually find you. Maybe, just maybe she was right. Meanwhile, across the city, Ava sat in her car outside her apartment building, engine still running, her coat still buttoned to the top. She hadn't gone inside yet. She stared straight ahead, her fingers tight on the steering wheel, the memory of Jack's voice playing over and over in her head. She didn't know for sure, not yet, but something deep inside her, something that had never failed her in business or instinct, was whispering, "It's him." The man who saved her. The man who disappeared. The man who somehow walked back into her life 12 years later because of a simple, wrong turn. Ava wasn't someone who believed in fate, but tonight, for the first time in a very long time, she wasn't entirely sure that was true. And something about that terrified her, and thrilled her, and maybe broke something loose inside her chest that had been locked away far too long. The next morning, Ava Whitmore stood in front of the mirror in her corner office, buttoning the last clasp of her charcoal gray jacket. She stared at her reflection longer than usual, not to check her makeup, which was as precise as always, or to smooth her already flawless hair. She was looking for something else, something she hadn't seen in a long time. Nerves, not panic, not fear, but a quiet, pulsing uncertainty she hadn't felt since her early 20s, since that night. Since the accident. She exhaled, picked up the folder Melissa had placed on her desk, Jack Carter's application, and sat down. Across the room, Melissa stood with 2 mugs of coffee in hand. She placed one on the desk, hesitated, then finally asked, "Are you sure you want to do this yourself?" Ava looked up, her voice calm. "Yes. You haven't conducted an interview in, well, years, I remember." She paused. "This one's different." Melissa nodded slowly. She didn't press. She had known Ava long enough to recognize the signs. When Ava shut down emotionally, she was hard as steel. But today, something in her had shifted. Her silence was no longer made of armor. It was made of memory. "He's in the lounge," Melissa said. "Ready when you are." Ava glanced at the clock. 8:58 a.m. Bring him in. When Jack entered, he did so with cautious confidence. Not the swagger of a man trying to impress, but the steady poise of someone who had walked through storms and never expected applause for surviving them. He wore a pressed shirt sleeves rolled once and clean jeans. His boots were scuffed but polished. His posture was upright, respectful, but his eyes held something even more valuable: sincerity. Ava stood and extended her hand. "Mr. Carter, thank you for coming." He shook her hand, his grip firm but not forceful. "Thanks for inviting me back. I didn't expect, well, any of this." "Neither did I," she admitted, gesturing to the chair across from her. He sat. She followed. There was a beat of silence before Jack smiled faintly. "You didn't call security this time." Ava almost smiled back. "Progress." Another silence. Not awkward, but loaded. Jack leaned forward. "Before we start, can I ask something?" Ava raised an eyebrow. "That letter from my daughter. Did you read it?" A pause. "Yes." He nodded, looking down. "I didn't know she put it in there. Found out after the fact. I hope it didn't come off as unprofessional." Ava's voice softened. "It was the most honest thing I've read in months." Jack looked up. "She's a remarkable girl," Ava added. Jack's shoulders eased just slightly. "She's my center of gravity." Another silence passed, but this one was different. Something in Ava's tone invited truth, and something in Jack responded with trust. "I was surprised by your message," he said. "Didn't think CEOs handled maintenance interviews personally." "They don't," Ava replied, "but I needed to meet you again." He tilted his head, slightly curious. Why Ava didn't answer right away. Instead, she opened the folder before her, skimming his resume as if seeing it for the first time. She already knew every word. "You served in the fire department," she said. 10 years. Jack nodded. "Upstate, mostly. Albany Division. You left after an injury." "Collapsed stairwell," he said simply. "Nothing heroic, just bad luck. Torn, shoulder-fractured hip. Took me out of commission. After that, I reinvented. You miss it." He didn't answer right away. "Every day," he said finally. His words hung in the air like a confession. Ava set the folder aside. Her hands folded on the desk knuckles, slightly tense. 12 years ago, she said quietly, "I was in a car accident. Route 9. Middle of the night. Wet road. My car spun off and hit a guardrail. Trapped me inside. The engine caught fire. Jack's eyes sharpened. A man pulled me out." She continued. He was in uniform. Firefighter jacket. Smoke everywhere. I was bleeding, dazed. I never saw his full face, but I heard his voice. He kept saying, "You're okay. I've got you." She looked directly into Jack's eyes now. And yesterday, when you spoke, I heard it again. Jack sat back slightly, not in disbelief, but in recognition. A flicker of something flashed across his face. Memory, maybe even guilt. Ava continued, her voice steady. No one ever found him. My mother buried the story. She didn't want it to damage my reputation. I never got to say thank you. Jack exhaled slowly, nodding once like a weight had just landed on his chest. I remember that night, he said quietly. We weren't even supposed to be on that route. Got diverted from another call. Your car was already smoking when we got there. I was closest. Pulled you out. You passed out in my arms. Ava's throat tightened. I stayed until the ambulance came, he said. Then my chief told me to move on. No ID, no name. Just gone. You didn't come back, she asked. I didn't think I mattered that much, he admitted. Just did what anyone would. No, Ava said, voice low. Not anyone. You did something no one else could. Silence again. And this time the air between them pulsed with something new. Not just recognition, gratitude, connection. Jack looked down, unsure of what to say. I'm not offering you a job because of that night, Ava said. I'm offering it because of the man I saw walk into that room yesterday, because of a daughter who believes her father is a hero, and because, somewhere deep down, I do too. Jack blinked, jaw tightening as emotion rose up uninvited. Thank you, he whispered. No, she said softly. Thank you. Outside the windows, the city moved on cars and snow and strangers rushing past. But in that quiet corner office, two people who were once nothing more than a forgotten rescue and a missing name finally saw each other clearly. And for the first time in 12 years, Ava Whitmore felt not just grateful but changed. The following afternoon, Jack stood at the sidewalk across from Whitmore Global's towering glass headquarters, gripping a folded paper in one hand and Ellie's mittened fingers in the other. Are you nervous, Daddy? She asked, craning her neck to stare up at the endless windows. He chuckled lightly, adjusting the scarf around her neck. Honestly, a little. Why? Because sometimes, he said, you meet someone who changes how you see everything. And you don't want to mess it up. Ellie wrinkled her nose. Like when I met Mrs. Green and said she looked like a pickle? Jack laughed. Exactly like that. She giggled and leaned her head against his arm. A car horn blared somewhere down the street and Jack glanced at the time. 15 minutes early. Too early to go up, too late to leave. He looked down at his daughter's hopeful face, then back up at the building. I think she's nice, Ellie said suddenly. Who Jack asked. The lady. The CEO. Jack hesitated. Why do you say that? Ellie shrugged. Because you came home different. He looked at her, surprised. You didn't say much, she continued, but your eyes looked lighter. Jack didn't have a response for that. He just squeezed her hand and said, You're a lot wiser than 9, you know that. She beamed. Across the city, in a very different neighborhood, Ava Whitmore stood by the window of her penthouse apartment, phone in one hand, coffee untouched in the other. Her call with the board had just ended. The tone had been respectful, but the message clear. Her decision to personally intervene in hiring processes was concerning. She didn't care. Not today. She turned toward the hallway and walked to the small glass cabinet nestled between two minimalist bookshelves. Inside sat a box, plain gray, wrapped in dust. She opened it carefully. Inside lay her firefighter's badge. Not hers, of course. One of the few things left behind in the chaos of the accident. It didn't belong to Jack. It had belonged to another responder who'd pressed it into her trembling hand after she'd asked who had saved her. But it had become a symbol of the man she'd never found and the girl she had been before. Everything hardened. She carried it to the kitchen and set it gently on the counter. For 12 years it had meant unfinished business. Today it meant possibility. When Jack arrived for his first official day, the HR assistant blinked in confusion, double-checking her tablet. "You're not going through the usual onboarding nope," he said, holding up a printed badge with a gold executive wing clearance sticker on it. She tilted her head. "You know someone?" He smiled, apparently. Melissa was already waiting by the elevator when he stepped out. Today she looked more polished than usual, still herself, but with something lighter in her posture. As if watching Ava soften had untied something inside her too. "Welcome back," she said warmly. "You've got a new title." Jack raised a brow. "Facilities Integration Consultant." He laughed. "That sounds fake." "It's real enough to get you a parking spot and a company iPad," she replied. "And per Ms. Whitmore's orders, you'll be involved in the design phase of the new community outreach program." "Outreach?" he echoed. Melissa nodded. She said she wanted someone in the room who understands people from the ground up. Jack was quiet for a moment, genuinely moved. She doesn't have to do that. She knows Melissa said. That's probably why she's doing it. Later that afternoon, while Jack reviewed the first floor's repair logs, Ava stopped outside the maintenance office and knocked softly. He looked up surprised to see her standing there without her usual entourage. "Got a second?" she asked. "Of course." She stepped inside, glanced around the modest room. There were blueprints tacked to the wall, a box of tools neatly arranged, and Ellie's crayon drawing of a smiling building taped proudly near the desk lamp. Ava paused, smiling faintly. She drew this. Jack nodded. "Said your building looked lonely." So she gave it a face. Ava's smile deepened and her eyes settled on Jack. "I wanted to ask you something," she said. "Not as your employer." He set his folder aside. "Shoot." "That night, 12 years ago, why didn't you come forward?" Jack leaned back thoughtful. "Because the story wasn't about me," he said. "You survived. That was the ending I needed." She studied him for a long moment. "Do you regret it?" He paused. "Sometimes. Mostly. I wonder if I missed a chance to make something matter." "You didn't miss it," she said softly. "It just took 12 years to find the right moment." They stood in quiet understanding. The air between them was no longer filled with questions, but with something gentler. Earned trust, shared history. Ava reached into her coat pocket and pulled out the old badge from her apartment. "I think this belongs somewhere new," she said, handing it to him. Jack took it slowly, reverently. "Thank you." As he turned it over in his hand, Ava added, "I want to build something here, Jack. Not just a business, a legacy." He looked up. "One where people like me belong." She nodded. "Especially people like you." There was no need for more words. He smiled, a full, easy smile that reached his eyes. Ava returned it, and for the first time in years, she didn't feel like a woman preserving a kingdom. She felt like someone opening a door, not just for Jack, but for herself. The office lights had dimmed to a soft amber glow as the last employees filtered out for the evening. Ava sat alone at the long glass conference table, her tablet glowing beside her untouched espresso. The building was quiet now, its usual hum softened by the snowfall outside, but Ava's mind was far from still. She tapped her fingers lightly on the table, staring at a single page in front of her, Ellie Carter's letter. She had read it a dozen times by now, but tonight it read differently. Not as an executive, not as someone trying to solve a riddle, but as a woman who had once been a girl desperate to believe that anyone might care without needing a reason. A soft knock on the glass door broke her reverie. It was Melissa. Ava glanced up expecting a report or reminder, but the look on Melissa's face made her pause. Calm, but focused. Thoughtful. "Got a minute?" Melissa asked, stepping inside without waiting. Ava nodded. Always. Melissa approached the table and slid a small envelope across to her. "You asked me to follow up on a few things. The night of the accident names on duty responders." Ava straightened. "You found something?" Melissa nodded. "Sort of. There's no official incident report tied directly to you, but I traced the emergency dispatch logs from Route 9 that night. There was a unit rerouted from a house fire 10 miles away. One of the responders was Jack Carter." Ava's breath caught. I thought he said they weren't supposed to be there. They weren't, Melissa confirmed. But when another crew got delayed, his captain sent Jack's team to cover. Just a fluke. One of those 30-second decisions that change everything. Ava sat back absorbing that. Melissa hesitated. There's more. She pulled out a small photo and placed it on the table. It was a blurry black-and-white image taken from an old fire department newsletter. Jack, much younger but still unmistakably Jack, stood with a team in front of a charred farmhouse. No smile, just quiet strength. He didn't lie, Ava murmured. But he never told me either. No, Melissa said gently. He didn't. And that says something. Ava nodded. Her mind was turning now, not in a corporate way, but in a personal one. Jack had carried her out of the wreckage of her car, saved her life, and then walked away as if none of it mattered. He hadn't tried to leverage it. He hadn't sought her out. He had left that night with the same quiet dignity he walked in with now, and somehow his daughter had inherited all of it. Ava looked again at Ellie's handwriting, the uneven scrawl, the accidental spelling mistake in pancakes, and something inside her ached. She remembered her own childhood. Her own letters, carefully composed, never sent to a mother too busy for stories, too consumed by campaigns to notice bedtime, was always silent. Ellie's letter was more than a child's plea for her father to get a job. It was a small act of faith. Faith that someone in power might listen. Ava suddenly stood, grabbing her coat. I need air. Melissa blinked. It's snowing sideways out there. Good, maybe it'll knock some sense into me. 10 blocks away, in a warm kitchen that smelled faintly of grilled cheese and laundry soap, Jack sat at the table while Ellie colored a rocket ship on the back of an old receipt. He watched her sipping tea, his mind full of things he couldn't quite explain. The meeting with Ava had left him both grounded and adrift. She had looked at him not like a charity case, not like a liability, but like someone seen. Really seen. He wasn't used to that. He reached for the badge she'd given him now, resting on a small tray beside his wallet, and turned it over in his hand again. You okay, Daddy? Ellie asked without looking up. Jack smiled. Yeah, just thinking. About Miss Ava. He chuckled. Maybe. I like her, Ellie said, switching crayons. She's not loud, and she listens like you do. Jack tilted his head. How would you know that I just do? He reached over and ruffled her hair. You're a good judge of character. I'm also a good secret writer, she said proudly, reaching into her backpack. I wrote her a second letter. Jack's brow lifted. Ellie. It's short, she protested. Just to say thank you. You said we should always thank people who are kind, right? He softened. You're not wrong. Do you think I should send it? She asked. Jack paused. Tell you what, let's wait a day. If tomorrow still feels like a letter day, we'll send it together. Ellie nodded, satisfied. Deal. Then, as if on cue, there was a knock at the door. Jack frowned. Expecting anyone? Ellie shook her head. He stood and opened the door, and there she was. Ava. Snow dusted her coat and hair, her cheeks pink from the cold. She looked not polished, not pristine, but real, alive. Hi, she said, voice quiet. Jack stared, stunned. Everything okay? She held up the letter. I needed to know where it came from, she said. Not the name, the heart behind it. Ellie peered around, her father eyes wide. Miss Ava smiled a little caught off guard. Hi, Ellie, you're really here. I am. Jack stepped aside. Come in, please. Ava hesitated only a moment, then entered. The warmth of the apartment hit her like a blanket, the scent of crayons, grilled cheese, safety. She looked around. This was the opposite of her world, and yet it felt more honest. She knelt beside Ellie. Your letter meant a lot to me. Ellie beamed. I meant every word. Ava glanced up at Jack. So did he. In that moment, Jack realized what she'd come for. Not closure, not gratitude, but truth. She had come to find what she had lost long ago, a reason to believe that kindness still mattered even in boardrooms, even after 12 years of silence. Especially then. The boardroom was bathed in sterile white light, a stark contrast to the warmth of the evening Jack had shared with Ava and Ellie just 2 nights prior. The long glass table gleamed beneath recessed lighting, and the windows framed a wintry skyline draped in silent snow. Ava sat at the head of the table, her posture as poised as ever, but something subtle had shifted. The guarded stiffness that used to define her was gone. In its place was a sense of resolve, not icy, but rooted, purposeful. The board members shuffled papers, cleared throats, and tapped on tablets. They were waiting for the next item on the agenda, a vote to approve the mass layoffs outlined in the third quarter restructuring plan. 300 jobs. Gone. The CFO cleared his throat. Ms. Whitmore, we're ready to proceed to the staffing cut proposal. Finance has projected a 14% cost savings if approved with long-term retention benefits for senior roles. Ava didn't look at her screen. She looked at the people in the room. All of them well-dressed, polished, professional, and disconnected. I won't be supporting the proposal, she said calmly. There was a beat of stunned silence, then a sharp intake of breath from the VP of Operations. I'm sorry, did I hear that correctly? He asked, clearly baffled. I've reviewed the numbers, Ava continued, and I understand the savings, but I've also walked the hallways. I've talked to the people we're talking about eliminating. And I've changed my mind. The COO leaned forward, frowning. Ava, with all due respect, these layoffs were part of the approved turnaround strategy. Investors expect results. They'll get them, she replied. But not like this? Murmurs began to stir. Then Howe, the CFO, challenged. The ship is bleeding cash. If we don't downsize, we stagnate. There's no other way to course correct. There's always another way, Ava said, her voice firm. It just takes longer. And it requires us to stop thinking like machines. Melissa stood at the side of the room watching quietly. She had seen this shift coming. She'd witnessed the ripple Jack Carter had created, how one wrong door had nudged a CEO out of isolation and back into the human fold. I'm launching a new initiative, Ava continued. We're calling it Hiring with Heart. It focuses on integrating talent from unconventional backgrounds, veterans, single parents, late-life career changers into our infrastructure and innovation teams. Instead of eliminating 300 roles, we'll reassign 50, retrain 100, and open pathways for community reinvestment. The table exploded in a volley of concern and confusion. Rebrand at the cost of profit. This isn't sustainable. What precedent does that set? Ava let them finish. Then she stood slow and steady. 12 years ago, she said someone I didn't know saved my life. No press, no spotlight. He walked away with nothing, and I never even knew his name until this week. That silenced them. That man walked into this building by accident, she continued, voice tightening slightly. And in doing so, he reminded me what we lost when we started running this company like a system instead of a soul. She looked directly at the CFO. His name is Jack Carter. He now works here. And he's going to help lead this transition. Another murmur, this time tinged with something closer to curiosity than resistance. Let me be clear, she added. This isn't charity. This is correction. Correction for the culture we've created where only perfect resumes get a seat at the table. She paused. Then simply, we can do better. So, let's do better. The vote was close. Tighter than she'd hoped. But when the final count came in, the new plan passed 6-5. A small margin, but enough. That afternoon, Ava found Jack in the under-renovation workshop on the 5th floor, inspecting an outdated HVAC schematic. He looked up surprised. Didn't expect to see you down here, he said. I wanted to deliver the news in person. Jack set the plans aside. Bad or good? Good, she said, stepping closer. We're moving forward with Hiring with Heart. You're going to be part of the team building it. Jack blinked. Me? I thought I was just fixing old elevators and bad plumbing. You're also fixing something else, she said. Culture. Perspective. Me. He looked at her for a long moment, reading her tone. You sure you want to trust a guy who came through the wrong door? Ava smiled. That's exactly the guy I want to trust. He looked away, trying to hide the emotion rising behind his quiet smile. You know, this is probably the first job I've ever had where I feel like I'm showing up for more than a paycheck. Ava's voice softened. Ellie said something the other night. Jack turned. She said, you don't smile much anymore, Ava said, but she also said maybe a good job would help. Jack chuckled under his breath. That sounds like her. She's right, Ava added. You deserve to smile again. Their eyes locked not in tension but in recognition. I've been building walls for a long time, Ava said quietly, but I think I'm ready to build something else. Jack nodded, then extended his hand. Let's build it together. She didn't hesitate. She took his hand, firm and warm, and in that moment Ava realized this wasn't just about saving jobs. It was about restoring meaning, about proving that people weren't just lines on a spreadsheet, but lives that ripple outward in ways we can't always measure. And for the first time since her life had veered off course 12 years ago, Ava Whitmore felt exactly where she was meant to be. Not behind glass, not behind numbers, but here, in the heart of something real. It had been just over 2 weeks since the boardroom vote, just over 2 weeks since the moment Ava Whitmore chose to pivot her company away from cold numbers and toward something warmer, messier, and far more human. The Whitmore building felt different now, not because of new paint or policies, but because of the people. There was laughter in the halls again, conversations happening between departments that had never spoken. Jack's presence, quiet and steady, had become a kind of gravitational pull for those who once felt invisible. And Ava. She was changing too, bit by bit, without making a show of it. Her schedule still brimmed with investor calls and media strategy, but she'd started leaving work before sunset once a week. She walked instead of being driven. She smiled more, though never for cameras. She was becoming someone she hadn't been in a long, long time. Someone who remembered what it felt like to breathe without armor. Today was one of those days. The lobby was busier than usual, filled with people checking in for a charity event Whitmore Global was sponsoring at a local shelter. Jack had helped organize it. He wasn't the type to stand at the podium, but his fingerprints were on every corner: transport vans, heating units, extra blankets, even a new coat drive Ellie had started in her school. Ava waited near the entrance coat, folded over her arm, scanning the crowd. Then she saw him. Jack stood near the side exit talking to a delivery worker whose dolly had tipped over. He knelt down, helping collect the spilled boxes without hesitation, sleeves rolled back, hands moving with practiced ease. He was laughing. It stopped her cold. Not because it was unusual, but because it was real. It wasn't the kind of polite laugh people offered in elevators. It was the kind that came from inside, the kind that reminded you life still had sweetness even after everything. She didn't call out to him. She just watched quietly until he stood and caught her gaze. For a moment, time slowed. He crossed the room to her, brushing snowflakes from his shoulder. "Didn't expect to see you down here," he said. Ava raised an eyebrow. "You say that every time I show up somewhere that isn't a top floor." He smiled. "Well, it's still true. I came to check on the coat drive." "Ah," he said. "In that case, Ellie beat you to it. She's been sorting sizes and bullying teenagers into donating better jackets." Ava laughed. "That sounds like her." Jack's expression grew more serious, but not heavy. "You did good, Ava. You really did." She met his eyes. "We did. None of this would have happened if you hadn't walked into the wrong room." "I still say it wasn't wrong," he said quietly. "Just unexpected." They stood in silence for a moment before Ava nodded toward the back hallway. "Come with me. I want to show you something." She led him through the employees-only corridor, past the staff kitchen, and down a narrow stairwell. They reached a door Jack had passed 100 times but never entered. It had no label. Ava pulled a keycard from her pocket and unlocked it. Inside was a simple room no bigger than a large office. Sunlight poured through tall windows. Along one wall were paint-splattered canvases. Along another, shelves of books and an old upright piano. Jack looked around, brow furrowed. "What is this? I used to come here," Ava said softly. "Before everything. Before the company consumed me. This was where I painted or played or just sat. It's been locked for years." He turned to her. "I forgot it even existed," she added. "Until Ellie reminded me what it meant to feel something without a meaning attached to it." Jack walked toward the piano, brushing his hand across the worn wood. "Did you play?" "A little," she said, almost shy. "My father taught me before he passed." There was a pause. Then Jack said, "You should open this room again." "I plan to. For you." "For the employees," she replied. "A place to breathe, to create, maybe even heal." Jack looked back at her. "That's not what I meant." She tilted her head. He took a step closer. "I meant, open it for you, Ava." Her breath caught. "You've opened doors for so many others," he continued. "But some of the ones that matter most, you've kept locked." She didn't reply right away. Then, with a quiet vulnerability he hadn't seen in her before, she said, "I'm afraid of what I might feel again." Jack nodded. "That's how you know it's real." They stood in the stillness of the sunlit room, old paintbrushes and piano keys bearing witness. She felt something shift inside her, not a dramatic lurch, but a gentle nudge, like someone reaching for a doorknob, and finally turning it. "I don't know what this is," she whispered. "You and me." Jack's voice was calm. "You don't have to know yet. But I feel like if I don't name it, I'll lose it." "No," he said, stepping beside her. "You only lose what you lock away." Ava looked at him, really looked, and for once she didn't try to predict the next move. She didn't rehearse a response. She didn't weigh risk. She just reached out and took his hand. No titles. No roles. No expectations. Just two people, both a little battered, both a little wiser, standing in a room long forgotten, reclaiming something neither of them thought they'd ever find again. Peace. Possibility. And the quiet courage to hope. The night sky over Brooklyn shimmered with distant city lights, snow still lingering on the edges of rooftops, softening the hard lines of the world below. Inside the Carter apartment, a warm glow spilled from the living room where Ellie sat cross-legged on the floor, carefully wrapping a small gift box in silver paper. She pressed down the tape with surgical precision, tongue sticking out slightly as she concentrated. Jack watched from the kitchen doorway, mug of chamomile tea in hand. "You planning on telling me what's inside?" Ellie grinned without looking up. "Nope. Is it another drawing of me with six-pack abs? That was for Father's Day," she said proudly. Jack chuckled and sat beside her on the couch. Okay. Can I at least ask who it's for?" Ellie paused, then held up the wrapped box with a small tag tied to it with string. "To Miss Ava." "Thank you." He blinked. "You're giving Ava a gift." "She deserves one," Ellie said simply. "She made you smile again." Jack looked at her, throat tightening. There were moments Ellie said things that didn't sound like they came from a child. They came from somewhere deeper, as if she were borrowing wisdom from a place Jack had long forgotten to look. He reached over and smoothed a curl behind her ear. "You really like her, huh?" "She's kind," Ellie said. "She listens. And she doesn't talk to me like I'm little." "You're 9, he reminded her gently. She shrugged. "Still counts." He smiled and leaned back, watching her finish the bow. But a thought tugged at him, soft at first, then more persistent. Ava had thanked him. She had reopened a room she hadn't entered in over a decade. She had stood in front of a boardroom and changed the course of hundreds of lives because of a memory she'd held on to. But he had never truly thanked her. Not for the job, not for her trust, not for seeing the man behind the resume. Because what she had given him wasn't just employment. She had given him back purpose. And that kind of gift demanded something more than words. The next evening, Ava stayed later than usual at the office. The building was quiet, most employees gone home, the lights on the executive floor dimmed to their evening setting. She stood in front of the piano in the newly reopened room of stillness, as some had begun calling it. It had already become a space employees used reading, sketching, playing notes between meetings. The energy was different in this room. Gentle. Permission-giving. She sat on the piano bench and rested her hands on the keys, not playing, just feeling the smoothness beneath her fingers. Then she heard a soft knock. Jack stood at the doorway, Ellie by his side, bundled in her purple jacket and snow boots. "Hope we're not interrupting," Jack said. "Never," Ava replied, rising to greet them. Ellie stepped forward, first holding out the silver-wrapped box. "This is for you." Ava smiled and knelt to Ellie's level, taking the gift with care. "May I open it now?" Ellie nodded eagerly. Inside was a small, simple snow globe. Inside the glass dome stood a little girl and her father holding hands under a pine tree with tiny flecks of silver snow swirling around them. On the base was a hand-lettered note. For the day, everything started again. Ava blinked hard and looked at Jack. He spoke before she could. That was her idea. "But it's from both of us." "I don't know what to say," Ava whispered. "You don't have to say anything," Jack said. "But I do." He stepped forward, his tone quieter now, more vulnerable. "I never thanked you properly for giving me a place here, for letting Ellie be seen, for remembering that night not as a footnote but as something sacred." Ava's eyes softened. Jack continued. "But more than that, thank you for letting me be part of something that matters. I didn't realize how much I missed belonging. You gave me that. Not as a favor, as a choice." She took in his words like someone listening to a lullaby for the first time in years. "I didn't just choose you," she said gently. "I remembered you. And I'm starting to believe there's a reason I never forgot." They stood close now, close enough to feel the warmth in each other's breath, the quiet current passing between two people who had tiptoed through trauma and somehow found each other on the other side. Ellie stepped back and whispered, "I think I'll go wait in the hallway." They both laughed, and Ava gently touched her shoulder. "Take your time." When the girl disappeared beyond the doorway, Jack turned back to Ava. "I was going to disappear again," he admitted. "Just take the job, do my work, stay out of your way." "You still could," she said. "I don't want to," he replied. "Not anymore." Ava looked at him, heartful, afraid to speak the next words, but knowing they had to be said. "I've spent 12 years building something everyone told me was impressive, but none of them ever asked if it made me happy." Jack didn't flinch. "Does it?" "It does now," she whispered. He reached out, brushing his fingers gently against hers. "Good." The silence that followed wasn't heavy. It was full alive with the kind of stillness that only comes when two people recognize something sacred between them. A beginning, not a fairy tale, not a rescue, not a miracle. Just two hands finally reaching across the divide life had built and choosing to hold on. Not because they had to, but because it was time. The morning after the gift, a soft blanket of snow had fallen overnight, the kind that coated everything in gentle white but melted by noon. The city awoke quietly as though holding its breath before spring's arrival. It was a Sunday, quiet, slow, reflective, and the Whitmore building was empty, save for two people. Jack stood at the top of the rooftop garden, newly reopened but still raw in its winter bloom. The skyline spread before him, softened by the final curtain of snow. Behind him, footsteps echoed gently on the rooftop gravel. Ava. She'd sent a message asking to meet him here early before the day had a chance to fill with responsibility. He turned as she approached, dressed not in a business coat or heels, but in jeans and a sweater under a heavy parka, her hair pulled back, her face unguarded. "Still think rooftops are for movie endings," Jack teased lightly. Ava smiled. "Then maybe we're getting close." They stood together at the railing, watching as the city shook the snow from its shoulders below. "I used to come up here when I couldn't breathe," she said after a moment. "Before the accident. Before I became someone who measured success by silence and spreadsheets." Jack didn't respond right away. He let her speak because that's what she needed. Space, time, truth without judgment. "I spent so many years thinking control was safety," she continued. "That if I planned every move, nothing would ever catch me off guard again. But nothing prepared me for a little girl's letter, or a father who walked into the wrong room and somehow reminded me who I used to be." Jack turned to her. "You weren't lost, Ava. You just got quiet for a while." She looked at him, something trembling behind her eyes. "Do you ever wish you could go back? Do anything differently?" Jack thought about it. Really thought. "I wish Ellie had known her mother longer," he said honestly. "I wish the fire hadn't taken that part of her story. I wish I hadn't disappeared after the rescue. But as for everything else? No, not if it led me here." Ava's eyes shone, but she didn't let the tears fall. "Not today. You told me once that you didn't think you mattered much," she said. Jack nodded. "Well," she said, stepping closer, "you do. To your daughter. To this company. To me." He swallowed hard, the weight of her words sinking in. "I've never trusted easily," she admitted. "Especially not men. Not after watching my father burn himself out trying to prove he belonged in a world that was never going to accept his softness." Jack's brow furrowed slightly. "He was like you. He was kind," she said. "Too kind for the circles my mother forced him into. He used to sneak me up here and teach me constellations like the stars had stories only we could hear. Then one day, he stopped coming. Not because he didn't love me, but because he couldn't keep pretending he belonged in a life that never fed his spirit." Jack listened, understanding, flickering in his chest. "Every time I wanted to quit this place," Ava whispered, "I thought of him. And now, I think of you." The words settled between them, fragile and true. "I don't want to be the girl in the burning car anymore," she said, "or the woman who keeps a locked room and a locked heart. I want to live like I believe people like us can change things not by being louder, but by being better." Jack smiled, then offered her his hand, not in romance, not in ownership, but in recognition. "I'll walk beside you," he said, "wherever this goes." Ava took his hand, gripped it. "I'm not used to being led," she said quietly. "I'm not here to lead," Jack replied, "just to stay." They stood that way for a while, hands linked the city breathing around them. Downstairs, Ellie waited with Melissa in the now bustling lobby. She held a sketchbook in her lap, working on something with colored pencils. "What are you drawing?" Melissa asked. Ellie grinned. "A treehouse on top of a building." Melissa raised an eyebrow. "That's ambitious." Ellie shrugged. "Well, Daddy says the best things happen when you build from the top down." Melissa smiled, glancing toward the elevator. "You know, she said you've changed things around here." Ellie looked up, blinking. "Me?" "Your letter," Melissa said. "Your heart. Your dad. They reminded all of us what matters." Ellie smiled, shy but proud. "I just wanted him to smile again." "He's doing more than that now," Melissa said. "So are we." That night, Ava sat at the reopened piano room, Ellie beside her on the bench, their hands playing mismatched notes and laughing when they got it wrong. Jack leaned against the doorframe, watching. For the first time in years, he wasn't fixing something broken. He was watching something whole being made, one note, one sketch, one gentle risk at a time. And in the quiet between notes, he heard something he hadn't heard since that night 12 years ago. Hope. Not loud, not dramatic, just steady, like a heart relearning how to beat in rhythm with another. And in that stillness, Jack knew they hadn't reached the end of a story. They were finally beginning the right one. The early days of spring arrived gently, as if nature itself understood that some things needed a slower thaw. The last traces of snow had melted from the city's shoulders, leaving behind sidewalks freckled with petals and puddles reflecting soft blue skies. The Whitmore building, once a monument to cold ambition, now felt different. Its glass no longer mirrored indifference but invited the morning sun inside. Ava stood at the glass wall of her office, not reviewing market projections or shareholder reports, but watching. Down below in the plaza, Ellie was holding a clipboard almost as big as her directing volunteers for the Spring Forward Day, a new initiative born from Hiring with Heart. Jack stood nearby, rolling up sleeves as he helped install a row of garden beds along the sidewalk. He laughed at something Ellie said, shook his head, and then gently lifted a bag of soil that looked twice as heavy as she did. Ava smiled softly. "Miss Whitmore." She turned. Melissa stood at the doorway, tablet in hand, but expression warm, relaxed. "You're due in the community wing in 10 minutes, she said. "The new staff center ribbon cutting." Ava nodded. "Is Jack already down there?" He insisted on installing the last bench himself. Said something about it needing to feel solid when people sit in it and think about changing their lives. Ava chuckled under her breath. "That sounds like him." Melissa hesitated, then added, "I know this isn't exactly the company your mother envisioned when she handed it to you." Ava's gaze returned to the window. "No, it's not." She paused. "But I think it's finally the one my father would have believed in." Melissa's throat tightened just a little, but she smiled. "Well, for what it's worth, I'm glad I stuck around to see this version." Ava turned to her. "I'm glad you did too." Outside, Ellie ran up the steps to where Ava waited, her cheeks pink from the wind. "We're ready," she beamed. "Daddy says the ribbon's too short, but I told him it's not about the ribbon." Ava knelt to her level. "What is it about, then?" Ellie grinned. "About opening things." Ava blinked, surprised by the simplicity and accuracy of that answer. "You're right." Ellie nodded sagely, then darted back toward the small crowd forming around the entrance of the new community wing, formerly the unused East Annex, now repurposed into training rooms, art spaces, and a small reading nook named Ellie's Corner. Ava joined Jack near the podium. He looked at her, his expression quiet content. "I should warn you," he said, "Ellie has a speech prepared. I wouldn't miss it for the world. She also said if I cry, she'll put it in the newsletter." Ava laughed. "She's your daughter, all right." The ceremony began with minimal fanfare, as Ava had requested. No media, no flashbulbs, just people. Employees, families, neighbors. Former applicants who had once been overlooked, now employed and thriving. A janitor who now led a mentorship program. A retired veteran who taught carpentry on Wednesdays. And standing among them, Ava realized something profound. She had spent years building walls in the name of strength. But real strength had come from opening doors. One of those doors had led to a single father who never asked to be seen. Another had led to a little girl who believed in letters and second chances. And now those open doors had become bridges. When the ribbon was cut, it wasn't with cheers, but with stillness. A hush, a sense of shared knowing that this wasn't just a formality. It was transformation. Later, as dusk painted the sky in soft lavender, Jack and Ava sat on a bench in the garden courtyard, one he had finished assembling just hours earlier. Ellie played nearby, chasing fireflies, her laughter floating like music through the air. Neither of them spoke for a while. There was no need. Finally, Ava turned to him. "Do you ever wonder if we would have met anyway?" "If you hadn't walked into the wrong room," Jack thought for a moment. "Maybe. Or maybe we only found each other because we weren't looking, just listening." To what he smiled, to what hurt, and to what needed healing. She nodded, slowly, her hand finding his. "You know, for a long time I thought the story of my life would always be split in two before and after that night on Route 9. But now—" She looked at him, eyes shimmering. "Now I think the real story started the day you walked into my boardroom and made everything wrong, feel like it had led somewhere right. Jack didn't reply. He simply brought her hand to his lips, kissed it gently, and rested it between both of his. Above them, the first star appeared, and below it Ellie twirled in a circle, arms outstretched, chasing light with the kind of joy only children and healed hearts could hold. And so the story didn't end with a rescue. It didn't end with a job offer or a romance or even a neatly tied ribbon. It ended and began with two people choosing to stay open to possibility, to kindness, to the quiet miracle of being seen. Because sometimes all it takes is one wrong turn, to walk straight into the place you were meant to be all along. We'd love to hear from you. Where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments below and share what part of this story touched you the most. If you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more inspiring, heartwarming stories just like this one. Thank you so much for spending your time with us. Until next time, take care and keep believing in kindness.